Good morning. Well, today's talk is about the 5 facts about anxiety. And I think it's kind of funny today. My backdrop for my phone in moving is this bottle of wine. So anyway, that's propping up my phone today for this live. So I think that's kind of funny. But a reminder that true love does begin with you. And it begins with self-love, with life skills, and also taking good care of yourself. So that's the reminder for today. And please listen all the way to the end because I do have a question for you about a question that will help you ponder your thoughts around anxiety. So, yeah. Well, I know that most of you know that I'm moving, so I've made some progress. We've got lots all stacked up here. So, yeah, that's a little bit of anxiety producing to be packing up your house and putting everything in pods and moving to a new location without having an apartment yet. So just a little bit of anxiety, but nonetheless, we'll begin our talk today. So yeah, 5 facts about anxiety. Well, one of the big things is to really look at the numbers that 31% of adults sometime in their life will have anxiety. And, you know, that's 1/3 of us will know what that is. So I think that what that really means to me is that there's more people who understands what anxiety is and how it manifests, and that you're not alone. So 31% of us adults will have anxiety sometime in their life. And, you know, I know going through divorce and separation and healing from narcissistic abuse, those are prime times where you may feel anxiety with your life being up in the air, with the legal battles and splitting up assets and homes and child support and all of that stuff. So it's no wonder that oftentimes when people go through divorce, that it is ridden with a lot of anxiety. So I understand that. And alarmingly, 7% of kids ages 7 through 13 now have a diagnosis of anxiety. And that's really shocking to me, you know, and it's shocking that we have young people that are really struggling with anxiety. And I just think like society today, there's just such demands on us to be perfect, to do things faster, and to respond to all sorts of stimuli. And I just think that's unfortunate for our little ones, and also gives us the ability to help teach them younger of some strategies to overcome stress and anxiety and give them some tools. You know, I don't have young ones in school, but it would be curious if anybody knows if there's any training or teaching or education in the schools about anxiety and stress and some helpful ways for children to deal with those. That would be interesting. So drop that in the comments if you happen to know that, if you have any young ones in school. And surprisingly, 23% of women report having anxiety, and only 17% of men actually report it. And there's an interesting fact around that is that more women are impacted with anxiety because we have a tendency to ruminate and to think about things over and over and over again, where I think sometimes men can just really put a pin in it and just move on. Their brains are wired in a different way. So I think that's kind of an interesting thought, that more women that we have more ruminating and more circular thinking on all of that, trying to solve things. And that kind of makes sense too, because we are multitaskers, and you know, we're always in the mix of trying to figure things out for kids and family at work and for ourselves. And that doesn't surprise me. We're wired for multitasking, but yet also have that rumination factor, and that would be curious if those two things are together. So the second fact about it is, what really is the difference between stress and anxiety? And, stress is an emotional response. It's an emotional response to an external trigger. And it has both mental and physical symptoms. And the symptoms can range from having a headache to muscle pain, maybe some stomach issues, trouble sleeping, fatigue. And, the one thing about stress is that once the trigger is gone, then our stress is abated. It goes away. And so, that's kind of one of the curious things about stress is when our stressor is gone, then when the trigger is gone, then our stress is gone. Unlike anxiety on the other side, which is also an emotional response, and it also does have both mental and physical symptoms as well. But the interesting thing about anxiety is that once our trigger is gone, that anxiety kind of remains in the background. So it's like those ruminating thoughts. It's just always percolating in the back of our brain and in our body. And again, anxiety can really present in a lot of different ways in many people. And I know for me, with my anxiety, that I do have like a reactive airway issue. And so my asthma actually gets activated when I'm under great stress. And each one of us has different markers for anxiety. And again, if you're willing to share, it would be interesting if you want to drop those in the comments. What's the number one way in which your anxiety presents? And for me, it's asthma. Like I really have to use my inhaler a lot more when I'm under stress and just have to manage that as well. And, the one thing is that people often confuse stress with anxiety. And, I think that may be another reason why a lot of people choose not to seek medical care or attention for that, is they're like, oh, I'm just under great stress. Well, again, the big thing is the difference between the two is when the stress is gone, when the trigger is gone, the stress is gone. But if the trigger is gone and you're still having issues after, then that's more anxiety. So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit there. The other thing is that's really interesting that I've noticed in my life too, is that anxiety is often related to anger. And, specifically by definition, anxiety is overstimulation from a stressful environment combined with perceived inability to deal with that threat. So that just means that we don't feel that we have the skills or the tools to deal with the danger or the threat. And that kind of amps us up. And that ends up triggering sometimes is depression. That's why we have anxiety, depression go together. And that's the most common thing to kind of go hand in hand with anxiety is depression. That we have that perceived inability to deal with that threat. So we get depressed. We're like thinking that we're not effective in dealing with our life's troubles or the stressors or the triggers or whatever else. But the other thing is to notice is there may be a line of anger that is below the surface in anxiety. And if you look at it closer, it's that feeling of powerlessness when you're frustrated, when you're angry, your increases. And one thing I learned in my healing is that hurt is actually a feeling of anger. I always thought hurt went into sad, one of the sad emotions, but hurt is actually anger. And so, maybe that's something, in the next couple weeks to kind of be curious about. Is there a thread of anger that happens in response to your anger? And I know for me, that is something that there is a thread of that. I get frustrated and angry, and that usually kind of ends up eliciting an emotional response. So that's kind of an interesting thing that there's anger underneath. And the fourth fact about anxiety is that, and I know for me also, is I just want to not have anxiety at all, is that we just want to be rid of it. We just want to deal with it. We want it to be over with. We don't want to deal with it anymore. And really, anxiety can actually be useful in our life if we use it as a good tool and as a good motivator. And, our body is really wired to be aware and perceive and anticipate threats. And when we do see that threat, then that takes us into swift action to protect ourselves. So that is really good when we're up against dangerous situations or stressful situations. And yet with anxiety, there is a motivating factor behind it. Think about all the time when we have family coming for a visit and we're so stressed out and we got to clean everywhere, or we are getting ready for that big deadline at work, or we're packing up before a vacation, and there's just this beehive of activity that's happening. So there actually is a positive element to anxiety. It helps us get into gear, to help us do things quickly, and it really helps us to get stuff done. And the other thing is that it actually helps us to do fun things that we might not normally do, like drive an ATV and go do a monster jump the thing, or bungee jumping, or skydiving, any of those things. That is all a fun element of anxiety, like pushing outside our comfort zones and helping us to expand our horizons. And it also can help us sometimes when we see the risks of things that are happening in our life, like what are the health risks of anxiety or other things in our life. And it spurs us to go ahead and embark upon improvement in our life in those particular areas. So yeah, sometimes people want anxiety to be totally gone and not ever seen again, but actually anxiety can be a driver to having fun and getting things done and being really good at it. And the last fact about anxiety is that it is 100% treatable. And that's the incredible thing, is that there are great tools and tips that can help us understand and work through our anxiety. And I have found that making a friend of anxiety has been helpful, more helpful to me than making it the enemy. And only 37% of all people actually seek out treatment for anxiety. I think that's really kind of curious too. Maybe there's still a stigma around folks that have anxiety. But the more and more that I'm out in the public domain and interacting with people, I find that a lot of people are readily able to admit that they have anxiety. I think that there is great awareness and education that can go a long way in helping people to understand their triggers and understanding some simple lifestyle and health and wellness tips and tricks that can help reduce stress and anxiety in your life and really can improve your life too. So anxiety is 100% treatable. At the low levels, there could be some very easy and simple tricks to combat anxiety. And the number one thing is more sleep. That is the number one simple thing that you can do for yourself, is to get more sleep. And when we sleep, when we get those 6 to 8 hours of sleep, that means that our brain rests. And just in that function alone, that helps to reduce that rumination component that is very large in anxiety. So if we get enough sleep, that'll actually help to reduce that level of rumination in our brain, which will help reduce the anxiety in our life. So that's the number one thing, is allowing our brain to reset during sleep. So sleep is number one thing. If we can get more sleep, we can reduce rumination and reduce anxiety levels. The next thing that's pretty simple is taking a 15-minute walk every single day. And if you can do that 2 times a day, that would be ideal. But that just really helps us to get into our body and to get out in nature and just to have that rhythmic motion of walking and touching, grounding with the earth and getting movement in our body, having our blood pumping and just getting everything aligned, our body and our brain and nature and seeing other things and getting out of our head. That's the second thing, is just getting some exercise. And walking outside is better than on the treadmill, but if the treadmill is the only thing, that's perfectly fine. And I love it. I actually live next door to 2 places. I live next door to an assisted living, and I live next door to a 55 plus community that's here. And I love watching the people, they do laps around their building. And sometimes there's 2 or 3 of them, or they're alone, or they're going out multiple times a day. If I'm out on my patio and I'm doing work in the morning and the evening, I see the same ones doing multiple paths. I think that's really cool. So we can just make it what we need to. We don't have to go drive to a hiking trail. We can just do it around our neighborhood, around our apartment complex, in the small towns that we're at, or add it to the coffee routine or whatever. But getting 15 minutes of exercise twice a day is ideal. And really that really goes into the American Heart Association of getting 30 minutes of cardiovascular activity 5 days a week. That really goes into that. But you start where you start. If it's a few minutes a day and you can walk, and you can build up from there. And that's a perfect way to start. If you can't do the 15 minutes, just start with 1 or 2 minutes. And again, I had this really awesome lady in the gym, and she had this goal. And when she first came in, she couldn't really walk on the treadmill. And we stood beside her and got her going, and she did 1 minute. And every single week after that, she added an extra minute every single day. And sure enough, within 6 months, she was able to walk her grandchildren down to the bus every single morning and get them when they came home from school. That was her big goal. So yeah, everything's achievable, but 15 minutes a day of cardiovascular activity and ideally walking is perfect for anxiety. And the third thing is self-talk. I think a lot of times we have this toxic thought process that's going on in our brain. And if we can just be very kind and gentle and compassionate to ourselves when those thoughts and when those physical symptoms come up, if we can just really find some nice words that work for you, like, hey, it's going to be okay. Have that little pep talk with yourself. Sometimes even record it. Sometimes we need to hear it in a different way. Maybe we need to write it down. And one of the things that's been really effective for me is when it happens, I'll deal with it. We have so many tools and we have so many experiences that we can pull upon that whatever comes up, we're going to be able to deal with it. And I think sometimes we forget when that anxiety, when those feelings of anxiety or the mental gymnastics of anxiety starts, we forget about all of that. And so I just wanted to remind you that if we have that self-talk, that we can give ourselves that little pep talk and hopefully that can actually kickstart our anxiety so that we can move along and not let it impact us. So yeah, those are the 5 facts about anxiety. And yeah, that's what we've talked about today. And the question that I want to just share with you that would be a good question to ponder is, what are the signs in your life that means that your life is getting unmanageable? And I think that's a really good awareness question. And for each one of us, it looks different. For some folks, and I know for me, it's about my wallet. Is my wallet organized, or is there just papers everywhere? And for some women, it's their purse. Everything's in their purse and they can't really find anything. So life becomes really unmanageable when their purse is disorganized. Maybe it's your car. Maybe when your car is looking disorganized, that means that that's a sign that your life is unmanageable, or that laundry isn't getting done, or you're going to fast food a lot more than what you're used to. So yeah, what are the signs in your life that your life is getting unmanageable? And I think that would be a really good awareness tool for putting some self-care in place and just recognizing that, oh, life might be getting a little bit stressful and I need to pay attention. And how can I be more self-loving and more compassionate and more kind to myself? So yeah, today we talked about the 5 facts about anxiety, and just wanted to end this discussion today with be your own true love and live happily ever after. And that really comes from loving yourself, from deploying more life skills, understanding how to be assertive, how to set boundaries, how to escalate, how to communicate, how to set consequences, and also self-care, taking care of yourself so that you are not run down and you're able to adapt and overcome life stressors and challenges. So I look forward to carrying on the conversation about things in the group, and I look forward to talking with you soon, and I hope you have a really great day. Take care. Bye-bye.